This morning, if you were not with us at 9 o'clock, the lesson that we had, I don't know how everybody else felt about it, but when I find information that I have not seen before, which is God's reward of us for continuing to study, it just thrills me. And so the lesson that we had this morning was, for me, it was thrilling to be able to go through that information and to actually realize that seeing God involves what we found out. And so are the sermons on the same DVD? End up being on the same DVD. So if you get today's, either one, you would be getting that. So this morning, when we deal with trying times, it really is helpful for us to actually get to have perspective for something. I mean, if you wreck your car and you know that the insurance is going to give you, I don't know if anybody has this kind of insurance, but if you have the kind of insurance where they replace your car with a brand new one, having a wreck is not nearly as bad. Or if you have home insurance and you have the kind of home insurance, if your house burns, they build it back brand new, and even some clauses that are better than that, like up to what it would be worth today as compared to when you bought it. Then all of a sudden, I know it's not like, okay, I wish my house would burn so I could get that kind of insurance, but perspective makes all the difference in the world. And when you're dealing with things and you have no perspective, no spiritual perspective, then that leaves a void for the devil. And we basically know that he is trying. Luke 8 tells us in the parable of the sower that the seed that fell on the wayside and the birds came and got it, that's the devil trying to get the word out of our minds. And so we know that that is what he wants to do, a void. If there's a void, then he will fill it. And so what we need to do this morning, what we always need to do, is have some perspective. Now, I asked Brother Eugene to read my scripture reading this morning for 9 o'clock, and both of my lessons had to do with seeing things, and so this was our scripture, but it was for this lesson. 1 Peter 3:12, "For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, his ears are open to their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil." You know, often we know a passage. Who doesn't know this passage? But very often we don't know context, and that's important. Scott, you're bothering me. Is something going on? Everything's good? I thought my car's parked out front and he's looking out the door, and I thought somebody's doing something out there. We don't have context all the time, and context is everything. You just never know what a passage is actually saying if you don't have your context. So here's the context. "Finally, be all of one mind, having compassion one for another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise, blessing, knowing that you are thereunto called, that you should inherit a blessing. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace. And who is he that will harm you, if you be followers of that which is good?" Now notice what's missing. I left out verse 12. It sits right here in the midst of this really beautiful passage, instructive passage that just, if we were able to do all of these things, just for instance, if your neighbor had all of these characteristics, wouldn't you like to live by that person? It would just be, if you saw them moving, you'd just be saying, "Don't do it. I just enjoy you so much, and there is no telling who's going to move in next." And so this is the context that we're looking at. The eyes of the Lord are over the righteous. And these are the things that he wants us to be doing so that he can continue to bless us and so that, verse 13, can come to pass. And who is he that will harm you if you be followers of that which is good? And so this morning, our lesson is centering around the idea of, are we vulnerable or are we actually sitting with a hedge around us? And if it is the case that we're sitting with a hedge around us, then what is going on? And what is the perspective that we should have? And so we can look at some verses and some instances in people's life, and I think that we can gain from them. 2 Chronicles 16:9, my favorite verse, especially if you're reading it from the American Standard Version of 1901, for the eyes of Jehovah run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong in behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards him. The reason it is such a beloved passage for me is because I have James A. Harding's book entitled The Eyes of Jehovah. And it is one of the most inspiring books, and I know I say that a lot about things like Arkansas Angels, but Eyes of Jehovah is about a man who believed in God's providence so strongly that he never had a schedule for gospel meetings. And I may have mentioned this before, I forget. We're on TV so much now that I can't remember, but he never had a schedule for meetings. He always stayed as long as people were obeying the gospel, and some people literally despised him because he couldn't be scheduled for a meeting and depended on to be there at a certain time, which made it hard for brethren to get ready for his meetings. He did so many gospel meetings, and he is one of the reasons for the great spread of the gospel in the early 1900s, the late 1800s, and the early 1900s. And so the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth. Now that's verse 9a, but look at verse 9b. Herein thou hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. So God was actually saying this to Asa, and he was reminding Asa of how God operates, and then he was telling Asa, you're not thinking about this anymore. Then Asa was wroth with the seer and put him in prison, in a prison house, for he was in a rage with him because of these things, and Asa oppressed some of the people at the same time. This section of Scripture in context is so very important because Asa had fought a battle, and I think Caleb did mention this last Wednesday, where he actually defeated 1 million Ethiopians when he was trusting in God. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 2, what he's actually doing now, though, what God is reprimanding him for. Then Asa brought out silver and gold out of the treasures of the house of the Lord and of the king's house, and sent to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, that dwelt at Damascus, saying, there is a league between me and thee, as there was between my father and thy father. Now, on a Wednesday 2 weeks ago, we actually looked at who Ben-Hadad was and who the Syrians are, and we know that they're kin to Abraham well back before they went into Babylonian captivity. Both Isaac and Jacob's wife actually came from the land where Abraham had gone or had come from, and his relatives were Syrians. And so here is Asa going into league with Syrians who are idolaters, very big idolaters. And yet God is saying to him, why in the world would you do this? Why in the world would you have this league and not actually trust God? Now, here's another. Genesis 42, verse 36. This is another of a verse that is a very favorite verse because of all that is involved in it. Genesis 42, 36. And Jacob their father said unto them, me have you bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, Simeon is not, and you will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. Now, in this particular context, I don't really think there's any of us that does not know this context. We know that Joseph, in chapter 37, has had dreams. He goes down at his father's behest to visit his brothers or to see about his brothers. They see the dreamer coming, and they hatch a plan to kill him. And as a result of Judah and Reuben, they don't kill him. They put him in a pit while they're thinking about killing him. And then they decide, well, what is a dead brother? Let's sell him. And so they sell him to the Ishmaelites, and he is taken off to Jerusalem and into Egypt. And so all of a sudden, we find Genesis 42, and a famine has come into the land. And Jacob sends his sons to Egypt to get grain. And as a result of them being in Egypt, the dreams come true with Joseph, and Joseph is the second in command, and he's actually in charge of the grain and the dispensing out of the food. And who does he see? But his brothers, who sell him, and he concocts a plan in which he actually takes Simeon and he holds Simeon until they get back home and they bring to him Benjamin. Why does he want to see Benjamin? Well, this is something that Caleb is actually teaching on television. The reason he wants to see Benjamin is because Benjamin is Joseph's brother from Rachel, the favorite wife, and it's the son of Jacob in his old age, and he is basically harboring Benjamin that nothing happened to him because he thinks Joseph is dead. And now on the way to get grain, he ends up losing Simeon. And he puts that together and he says, Joseph is gone too. All these things are against me. You ever feel like that? Y'all, that's perspective. How do we know? How do we know that any of the things that we're dealing with right now are against us? I'm saying it's 50-50 at best to tell the future. Is it not? We don't know, and so we can actually guess this is all working out for some affair good, that we actually need something. There's something that somebody needs, and there's no other way for it to happen than for this. That's 50%. On the other hand, it's just that we're all basically sinful, and God is punishing 823 Starling Avenue, and we basically know that can't be the case, because just simply if you start adding other factors, he wouldn't use corona that's in the whole world just to punish us, would he? I mean, bringing corona, the pestilence, and that's all for 823 Starling Avenue? So we know it's not the case that this other scenario is true, because everybody's suffering. And so as we suffer through this together, the corona, that's one thing. We even need to ask ourselves about perspective about that. What is happening? I don't do it, but I try not to murmur about corona. And the reason I say that is because we are getting lots and lots of Bible studies. I got a guy that is driving me berserk in Danville. He is I just cannot believe it. And I'm fairly certain that it has to do with the state of things, that he just absolutely needs now to have his mind helped put some peace into his life. So here we are, perspective. Does he know this? Jacob is succumbing to it. Now, let's get a little bit of information. Do you realize that they're only 2 years into this famine when Jacob says this? You know, when you're reading through something like this and you're reading, and as Joey mentioned, Caleb is doing the life of Christ, but Caleb's doing the life of Christ from the standpoint of geography in the life of Christ. You're going to get to study the travels of Jesus. Oh, this will be dull as Palestinian dust. No, it's not going to be dull. You will actually get to familiarize yourself with places, and he's bringing out all kinds of things, and then you will actually find out things about where Jesus traveled and how they treated him. It's a wonderful way to study. And the thing about it is, often, y'all, we don't uncover things like this. Who would have stopped to look and see how long this went on before Jacob just basically starts in on the wine trail? Everything is against me. All these things are against me. It's been 2 years into this famine. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. So 2 years into it, I'm trying to think just for a moment. Now, somebody can give me this here if I'm wrong, but I can't remember us having like major division and or a split since somewhere around 2007, 8, somewhere in there, when Jason left and several other individuals left as a result of that, Darlene and different ones. That's a long time, y'all. That's a long time for us to have relative peace and harmony and lots of good things happening. So for 2 years, these individuals are having trouble. And notice this, Genesis 45:5. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. Look at this. It's the next verse. So basically, you have 42, 2 years into it, and Jacob is he is grinding his teeth. Everything is against me. This is all going to turn out bad. And then we basically realize that Joseph is the one talking, and Joseph has decided to allow himself to be known by his brothers. And he says this, now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve your life. Now y'all, even Joseph, when he saw them in the first place, didn't think like this. He was mad when he saw them. My turn, dudes. I am going to really deal with y'all. I'm going to get my brother Benjamin here into Egypt. He's not really worried about his dad because he doesn't know that his dad thought he died. He has named one of his children Manasseh. I have forgotten my father's house. And he sees these brothers and he concocts a plan where he gets his beloved brother of his mother, and we're going to get her into Egypt. And he hears them talking as he is talking about his plan, and he hears them talking about the fact that their daddy doesn't know that he's dead, or doesn't know that he's alive. His daddy thought that he was killed by a wild animal because they came up with that plan. He also finds out that Reuben and Judah tried to stop the other brothers from doing this, and then he heard all the brothers say, our sin is coming back on us. And all of a sudden, he ends up changing his own heart. Perspective in everybody's life here. All this stuff is happening to me, Jacob says. 2 years of it. They get there, and their brother hears what they're saying, and his perspective changed, which means he's not going to go through with his plan any longer. And he realizes that everything that he went through, I think 17 or 13 years, that he went through in Egypt, sometime in prison, and even, y'all, the time that he spent in prison, was it not so that he could actually be in the position of the butler and the baker and the candlestick maker? I may have all of these different individuals wrong, but he's in prison with high up individuals, and he ends up telling a dream so that it can be heard to Pharaoh. How else would he be in a position to be with the individuals in Pharaoh's court besides being in jail? Perspective. Would it be tolerable to go to jail for a little while and put yourself in a position where you actually get to be with cabinet members or congressmen's interns or something, so you have a voice in Washington, D.C.? You never know what is happening. And so he says, I'm here to preserve your life. Genesis 45:7, and God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all the house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Now tell me this. Will this not be good as we leave here? Something rattling around in our head that demonstrates to us we don't know. And everything that happens that we possibly are grinding our teeth and murmuring about and sad and having difficulty, it could actually be turning something around and fixing something so that we can be in a position to do what it is that God needs us to do. How do we know that's not the case? We're sitting here reading two different accounts. Asa, he didn't trust God. He knew that the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout all the earth, show himself strong for those who our hearts are perfect before him. And now he's going to join up with Ben-Hadad. And we see a patriarch, Jacob, having a weak faith, and it ends up turning around, and it is just unbelievable. No one enjoyed it, though. That's the point. Sometimes you don't enjoy these things. Genesis 21:5, another instance. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him, and Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age, and the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast. And the same day that Isaac was weaned, Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. We went through this last week, but we didn't make this point. Mocking was, as you find in Genesis chapter 4, verse 29, which I've read this 100 times more probably. I never stopped to realize that was the inspired definition of what was going on back there. He was persecuting the little child that was being weaned, and as a result of that, wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. Now, this is a bad story. Doesn't it seem like a bad story? But is it a bad story when you really get down to it? Genesis 21:6, and she went and sat down over against him a good way off, as it were a bowshot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. My mind's made up. Ishmael's going to die. Do we ever do that? My mind's made up. It's just the cards are against me. Things are always against me. I just have this way of thinking constantly. And so she lifted up her voice and wept. And then we basically find out that God sees. Now, in Genesis 16:16, Abraham said unto Sarah, behold, thy maid is in thy hand, do to her as it pleased thee. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from his face. This woman is a servant to a woman that is dealing with her hard. You look up the word, and the word hard carries with it stripes. So that's who she's actually serving. And this is how she was treated when she was pregnant. Now the child is grown somewhat, and her mistress has a baby, and it's weaning age, and something happens between the two of them, and she has Abraham send her away. That's a bad story, isn't it? Is it really a bad story? In Genesis 16:13, and she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, thou God seest me. For she said, have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Beer-lahai. Now, in this particular instance, God took care of her when she was sent out by her mistress and she was told to go back. The question is, what about this next story when she is sent away with her child and she's not coming back? She is weeping because she thinks he's going to die, and look what happens that we don't see. Genesis 21:18, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thy hand, for I will make him a great nation, And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad to drink. Now, my question this morning is there a well that we don't see? Is there sustenance? Is it possible that some things are going to happen that we absolutely have no idea how they're going to work out? But does not God, who we serve, say that his eyes are running to and fro throughout the earth to show himself strong? For those whose heart are perfect, complete. How is our heart? That's really what it comes down to, is it not? How's our heart? If we are trying to do the right thing, if we're handling ourselves like 1 Peter 3, context, big context, the eyes of the Lord are over those. The eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. What was that context? It was that good neighbor. Are you that kind of neighbor? Are we that kind of Christian to each other? Are we trying to be? Then all of these things put together, it could be that just at any point, and you may be saying, Johnny, this stuff don't work, really? Do we believe the Bible? God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. Do you know that she then went to Egypt and her son married? She's no longer a slave. She's no longer a servant. She got her freedom. She didn't die. He didn't die. He goes down to Egypt and he becomes a great nation. So see how that worked out? And she was basically saying, I know I'm going to die. That's Hagar. Jacob. All these things are against me. See how this works? Now, you're possibly saying, and this could be the case, well, Johnny, you just try to put a positive spin on this kind of stuff. Wonder why I would do that. Some of the worst days of my life actually had to transpire for us all to be here together. And all of the things that we've been able to see together came from some of those events. So it's basically up to us how we're going to manage ourselves, whether or not we see the well when it actually appears, because it is impossible, y'all, it's impossible for us to constantly be beat up, is it not? I mean, there are verses that basically say after a little while, after you're tested, and then a little while, and you'll get a reprieve. That's Peter also, but it's in chapter 4. Notice this. 1 John 3:2, Beloved, now are you the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Our lesson is God sees us. This word that we're looking at right here, we shall see. Can you see your optometrist in this verse? This is a use of the word, we shall see him. This is a use of a word that you do not see regularly. This is like eyes wide open. The question this morning is, have you already been seeing God as he is? I'm saying in the sense of a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. That's what faith is, isn't it? Without faith, Hebrews 11:6, without faith it is impossible to please him. He that cometh to God must believe that he is, and the rewarder of them that diligently seek him. What is my lesson? What is our lesson? Stay the course. We don't know what is around the corner. This is around my corner. This came day before yesterday. 130 days of actually grinding away at the problems. Now, Caleb and I have actually been going more than 130 days because we started our daytime TV in March. And this is a guy in Houston that probably everybody had forgotten about. We started our daytime TV in March, and Ralph says, I'll be submitting my programs beginning next week to Houston to Houston Media Source. If you have any programming you want aired, let me know and I'll submit it. Hope all things are well on your end. Thanks. I respond, we have a year's material ready. Now, you know why we have 100 shows ready? Is because we did not succumb to this stuff. We kept right on pushing, just like God was going to reward us. Basically, just saying God is rewarding us. Whatever is going on here, it has some purpose that God wants to happen. For all I know, it created a different way of thinking for me, humbled me, basically made me see how things can happen that would be destructive and to watch out, all kinds of different things. But I'll tell you this, I didn't give up, and we have 1 year's programming between the two of us, Luke and Genesis, in the can, already ready to go. 6 million viewers in Houston, Harrison County, and we basically don't have to pay a dime. Now, you see why I'm optimistic? That was right around the corner. It's basically the well that we never even saw. It's basically just God blessing us to an unbelievable degree. Now, you might say, well, what's that going to do for y'all, for us? Well, for us in a material sense, nothing. But are we not concerned about lost souls? We'll be actually getting to be teaching people in Houston, Texas, on television, for free, for the next year. Now, basically, here's the application. Those of you who are holding it together and in continuing on, instead of allowing us to fall apart, the eyes of the Lord are running to and fro throughout all the earth, and He sees you here this morning. God bless you. And God be thanked that we have this opportunity and that we can continue to encourage each other. Don't you know that relieves Caleb? Because if we didn't have those shows ready, and all of a sudden Ralph said, he's paying the bills too, by the way. All of a sudden Ralph says, okay, y'all need to get some shows ready. Can you imagine what that would do to Caleb if we didn't already have this information in the can? So, this morning, God sees you. Let your conversation be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For He has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man shall do unto me. There's only just one way to unravel that. Just one way. And that's for us to forsake Him. Don't do it. Stay the course. Let's be rewarded. Let's have God have His way with us, whatever it is that is happening. He may be actually honing us and working with us because we may not be ready to deal with the level of attention and whatever levels go with this piece of information. If you're here this morning, while these things are on your mind, looking at these individuals that were wrong about the future, while you have this in your mind, if we need to pray together about something that's going on, let us pray together while we stand and sing.